Hello, welcome to week 10 in the lab. This is, I think, the second brand new video in a row. Woo! We're doing it. We're doing it. Last week, you wouldn't have had a new one if it wasn't for the fact that the previously recorded one had information you didn't need because I had changed some stuff up since last term. Hoping you utilized this past week to work on your project. Couple things I wanted to mention. One, the data. It's been interesting. There's a couple of times since the beginning of our term where a state has changed some of their numbers. And I thought that was interesting. Like, totally going to look it up. So I'm going to look weird on here, but I highlighted it in mine so I could remember to tell you when it was. I just have to find it. Okay, Florida. On October 7th. October 7th, Florida changed the number of people who had died. It was interesting. As in, if you had been collecting the data every single day, like I do, you would have seen that all of a sudden one day, a couple hundred people came back to life. I thought that was really bizarre. This happens sometimes. So when people sit there and try to argue and say they just list everything as COVID is the death, blah, 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 because I hear people argue this all the time. No, they don't. I mean, do you want to say it? Fine. If you want to, that's fine. But in your paper, you have to have actual sources to back it up. I'm just letting you know the data does get changed randomly. And I don't know if it's because they decide to change it, like, wow, that just looks bad, or if they do an audit and realize something was double counted. I don't know. But randomly, it changes. This semester-long project, hopefully you were working on it this past week. You're supposed to be trying to think up some questions and whatnot. One of the things I would highly, 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 highly suggest checking into is the fact that the numbers we're using are just what people have reported. A lot of people don't report. There are so many at-home tests that never get reported. There are also a lot of people who just don't get tested because a lot of people have the attitude of it's not like you can do anything, and so they just don't bother getting tested. So the numbers are kind of skewed. Our numbers should actually be higher than what they are due to this. So what would be interesting, take a look at some articles, research it, Google it, look at the amount of COVID they're finding in wastewater. That means they're testing the water that's coming from people's toilets. And in cities, they're finding so much more than is being accounted for. That's an interesting thing to look at. Then you also have, this is not COVID, but it's the wastewater stuff. Take a look at New York City and polio. It's kind of scary. Just interesting little things to look at. This week, you're going to be doing a critical thinking lab. It's going to drive you crazy. It does. It drives everybody crazy. What it is this is to kind of help boost your thought process. There's a couple of things you're going to have a hard time finding. First, I'm going to let you know, the first thing is you're going to look up the number of deaths from the flu for the years 2019 and 2020. Those are two of the things you're going to look at. You can look up 2021 if you want to also. That's fine. But you have to do at least 2019 and 2020. Here's the deal. Almost every term since I've started doing this, people will give me the most bizarre answers for this. Make sure you are looking at the actual number of deaths, not projected. Actual number. Take a look for that. Then look up the ages of those who have tested positive for COVID. This one, usually not terribly hard to find. Look up the death rate numbers or percentages for different age groups. When I say different age groups, look at how many people have died that were under a year. How many that were between 3 and 5. How many between, I don't know, 7 and 13. I don't know what the age categories are, but they have these very specific age categories. They have like the 20s and the 30s and the 40s and the 50s. They have 65 and over, that kind of thing. I want you to look at the ages of these people, the death rates of these people. It's interesting. The numbers are one thing, the percentages are way more interesting. But I want you to take a look at that. If you can find the number of death rates for different ethnic groups or different income levels, like socioeconomics, where they are, see if more rich people are dying or more poor people are dying, that kind of thing. Those two are a little harder to find, but I promise you it's out there. So do your best. Now, you're going to do this. And then what I want you to do after you get those, you have to get all those things. You need to tell me about it. Yeah. Okay. That's the main part there. Here's the hardest part right here. The absolute hardest part for most people. You have to pick one of your original assumptions or belief about the coronavirus and COVID-19. Remember that very first article, that very first assignment you had where it said semester long project, the beginning, and you had to give me your personal opinion at the start? You need to pick one of those. And then you have to try your hardest to prove yourself wrong. Because the way science works, science is not about proving yourself right. It is about failing to prove yourself wrong. It is called, oh gosh, I just blanked. I hate when that happens. It's going to come to me in just a moment, and I'm going to, bleh. But anyway, what happens is if you believe something, like say, I don't know, I believe I own a cat. I have to do everything in my power to prove I do not own a cat. I have to prove 100% I do not own a cat. As soon as I fail to disprove, that's the phrase I was trying to think of. When I fail to disprove myself, that means I am correct. The reason you have to do this, one, that's how science works, because everybody here has had it before where you got into a disagreement with somebody. You had an argument. You wanted to prove you were right. You knew exactly where to go to back up what you believe. So you could be like, look, all these people think the same as me. Doesn't mean you're right. It just doesn't. Just because a million people say the same thing does not mean you are right. It just means these people say the same thing. You have to try your hardest to prove yourself wrong. You are going to tell me what the thought is or the belief or whatever, and you have to tell me every step you take on how you tried to prove yourself wrong. Tell me where you looked, what you researched, what were the sources you looked at, what happened. Then I want to know if you did prove yourself wrong or if you failed to prove yourself wrong. And then tell me what you thought about that. People who are really good at critical thinking do phenomenal on this. People who just do that whole, well, that's what I think. Oh, they hate me. They hate me on this assignment. But you need to learn to think critically, not just say something because family said it, your political party said it, your pastor said it, your preacher said it, your mom said it, your dad said it, your best friend said it, your teacher said it. You have to try your hardest to figure out why it is the way it is. Prove yourself. That's it. So in order to do this lab correctly, you have to try your absolute hardest to prove yourself wrong. That means broaden your horizons. That means stretch your brain. Try. And then give me the final result. Were you right? Were you wrong? And I've had this in the past. I don't understand it, but I've had this in the past where somebody did the lab exactly the way they were supposed to do. They actually proved themselves wrong. They admitted they proved themselves wrong, but they said they chose to still believe this because that's what they want to believe. More power to you. I don't understand finding out you're wrong and then blindly deciding to ignore the fact that you're wrong. I don't understand this, but people do it all the time. Am I saying you have to change your mind? No. Am I telling you what your opinion has to be? No. I am not telling you at all you have to believe anything. You just have to actually act like a scientist in this course, which means try to prove yourself wrong. You need sources. You need to back it up. Be careful of the sources you go to, though. That's another big thing. One, I've said it before. I think I even have it in here. Wikipedia, not a valid source. Can't use Wikipedia because it's full of crap. Wikipedia is popular opinion. If you have ever watched the show Family Feud and you have been baffled at some of the choices people say, that's because that's popular opinion, not a fact. Science is fact, not opinion. Science is fact, not a political party. Science is fact, not a religion. Science is just fact. It does not care what side you're on anything. It's just a fact. So that's what you have to do. You have to get rid of all the rest of that crap and just concentrate on the fact. So when you are researching, you already know there's going to be certain sources that lean more this way or lean more that way. Does that mean you can't look at them? No. It's just if you look at this source, you need to also look at this source and then see if you can find one of these sources. Compare them. If all you do is look at these sources, that is not broadening your horizon. Example. Clearly environmentalist here. And I'm a vegetarian and I am biased about very particular things. There is a website, Mother News Network, has some great stuff on there. However, very biased. If I want to know anything about genetically modified organisms, Mother News Network will sit there and bash it like crazy. They're biased against it. They are not actually accurate. So I can't use them when talking about GMOs because they are purposely only looking at this much right here. They're not looking at all of this. Not a good source. Say I'm wanting to talk about marijuana. High Times Magazine, very biased for marijuana use. Probably not a good source if I'm trying to look scientifically at something. This is why scientific articles truly tend to be your best bet. But do your best, broaden your horizons, shoot me a message if you need help with it. This is one of my favorite labs for people to do because it excites me to know that some people are learning to think for themselves for the first time. This is also the lab that makes the most people angry, and I get some really interesting things turned in every term, and some people who are very angry at me for it. So not doing it to make you angry, doing it to help make you be someone who can think for themselves, not just follow a crowd. And I think that's important. I think we need more people who know how to think for themselves, which is why, again, I'm not telling you what to think. I'm telling you to learn and to expand your horizons so you can think. And that's it. I think that's pretty much it. Hopefully when these get turned in and I grade them and I give you feedback, hopefully I'll have a new video for you next week where I can, discuss some of it. And hopefully it'll be not so long because holy crap, if I haven't done a video for you lately, I feel like there's so much that's been filling up that I have to share. And then it's like, it goes everywhere. Aren't you kind of glad you don't have me as an in-person class? Because I never, ever, ever shut up. Yeah, I guess that's it. So good luck. Message me if you have questions. Peace out.